All right, welcome in. Cube Show Podcast, college football podcast comes to you on Sundays. We got a good one for you today. Finally catching up with our buddy Josh Pate from Late Kick. We are always brought to you by Wickles Pickles. Wickedly delicious. Go pick them up in your grocery store. If you don't have them, go to wickles.com. You can order them. They are fantastic. We love them. Appreciate Wickles being the title sponsor of the show. You should eat those if you can find them. And at Wickles Pickles on Instagram, get different recipes, different ways to use them. They are great. Josh went to Big Ten Media Days. He was with me at SEC Media Days, and I wanted to just kind of trade some ideas of things that we saw, we liked, and I knew it would lead into some good conversations. It's long, but I think you guys are going to love it. So we'll just get right into it. Here's Josh Pate. For the second consecutive SEC Media Days, we were unable to get Josh Pate on tape. Not due to lawyers this time, though, due to his rotating studios, I guess, in parentheses, asterisk, because that's what you wanted to call it.
I'm too busy.
Being
I'm too
random
busy
places.
Yeah, I'm just too busy for you.
Showing up and recording in the middle of the hallway one day, in the lobby another day, so just didn't know where to make it happen. You and I were having an interesting. Thanks for joining us, by the way. It's good to be with you again. You can go ahead and tell everybody you're not having me back for cold cuts this year if you want to announce that.
I'm not ready to announce that here. I want to announce that in a much more embarrassing and high profile manner. I don't know. First off, let me not get your dauber down. I am not announcing that. Okay. We have spoken behind the scenes. We're working on the best possible way to deliver that groundbreaking, possible award-winning content.
Okay. We'll work on it. We'll see what happens. Were you really jealous at my little celebrity meetup that I had last week?
Yeah, because while everyone else was talking about you meeting Champ Kine and Whammy and whatnot, that's Todd Packer to me. That is Todd F. Packer. And first and foremost, I would have just dropped office references at him, and then someone would have come in afterwards and done the Anchorman stuff.
We had McElroy to do most of the office stuff, so he handled the nerdy stuff. I handled the fun stuff. So, but you and I were having an interesting conversation. You just got back from Big Ten Media Days. I didn't make it to that. And that was off of SEC Media Days. And we were just talking a little bit, sharing some information that we had. And you kind of alluded to the fact that, not saying that we don't get anything, because it's, first off, it's great to get FaceTime with not just coaches and players, but other members of the media. And you do get certain information from certain people, but it feels less informative, I guess, about big topic items or big ticket items, things that we didn't already feel like we knew. I guess not a lot of questions really answered. And some of that may be the coverage of today's college football and just how much more in depth it is. And it kind of got me thinking, and we finished our conversation of, all right, well, what did we take away from these media days the last couple weeks? And so I had a couple things I shared on last week's show that I kind of wanted to run by you and wanted to get you to run a few things by me from Big Ten Media Days. And so we'll kind of just bounce those off each other if that's good with you. And I think a couple of them will take us into bigger conversations about what's coming up this season. And I want to start with this one for you. I had a chance to spend about 10, 12 minutes with Jackson Dart. And there are a lot of people who love that team for good reason. They got a chance to be really good. But I think there are a couple of guys in college football, and there's so much movement in the portal, Josh, we're going to forget guys. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody has forgotten Juice Wells. But when I asked Jackson about him, seeing the way that he lit up, and he began to talk about him being a monster. And he said, we don't have another guy like him on our roster. He does things no one else can do. This is coming from the Ole Miss quarterback. It started reminding me of the things that I was hearing about Juice Wells early at South Carolina that those folks were saying. And that got me thinking, what if he is that guy this year? Because I think a lot of people are kind of like, oh, well, I mean, they got Trey Harris and they got Priestcorn and they got Jackson Dart. Like, it's going to be all good. But like, what if Juice Wells is really the guy that we saw 2 years ago, or the guy even at JMU? He was, a badass then. Like, how crazy good could this Ole Miss football team then be?
So that, and then you got Jim Nagy walking around SEC Media Days all week, and he's talking to every NFL guy under the sun. And someone I heard asked him about Quinshon Judkins, what kind of hole that leaves in the backfield at Ole Miss. And he said, yeah, good player. Judkins, really good player. What if I told you some of the NFL guys have Bentley rated every bit as high, if not higher? From a prospect's perspective, as Judkins. So what if, to your point, that's true with Juice Wells? And then what if Bentley's that kind of stud in the backfield? Don't have any questions about who Jackson Dart is. You know who he is as a player. Look, I keep going back to this. You worked a couple of their games last year, so you had a really good look at it. Judkins is a stud from a talent perspective. When he voluntarily leaves that team, and it almost seems like internally the messaging from the players, not the coaches, was, all right, we're fine. Uh, that right there, more so than anything else, sort of raised my antenna because that's a signal. That's a signal of like a player-led team that knows we got what we need in house, and farewell. We'll see you down the road, but we'll be fine. They know more so sometimes than the coaches even know, and they certainly know more so than anyone else. So I don't doubt he lit up when he talked like that. And yeah, if he is, what we thought we had at South Carolina a couple of years ago, like I try and envision what could I be feeling about the Ole Miss offense or any team. Ole Miss just happens to fill in the blank here. And they've got a preseason, man. Not everyone has a bona fide preseason baked into their schedule. So they get to work out any potential kinks in the hose pipe they have, and they should be full speed ahead. I can keep looking at that Georgia game they got late in the year, and we've seen them match up very recently, and it was a mismatch physically. Those things don't always just carry over year to year. The gap's never quite as wide as the scoreboard makes it seem on a given Saturday. That thing is one I'm really looking forward to.
All right, so let's stay just quickly with Ole Miss. My biggest concern is still getting to that point in the year and facing a team that physically has just been different from you the last couple of years, and maybe how you withstand it or how you react to it. I don't have a lot of other massive concerns. Really, there's not going to be concerns with the roster. You can't find a lot of holes in the roster, especially compared to a lot of the teams not named Alabama, Texas, Ohio State. What would be your biggest concern with that team making a special run this year?
I'd say the intangible stuff that exists on any great team that you can't possibly know to predict because of the way the team's been put together or the pieces have been put together. If they coalesce, if they gel the right way, I don't know anyone that's got a formula to predict that. And the other thing would be, how big are your flaws? How big are your inadequacies? Are they moderate? Are they major? When will we see them? So we'll see them at LSU the 12th. I'd be really interested to see their defensive front against that offensive line, the 12th, down in Baton Rouge. And then they got to bye Oklahoma at Arkansas and then Georgia. So look, Georgia included here, man. I don't know that we're talking about Georgia as having the most elite defensive front ever known to mankind up there. I think even the folks around Georgia have been talking about the first world problem that they have right now of maybe we're not elite off the edge. Maybe we're not elite. Maybe we don't get the pressure in the interior like we have once upon a time. So if Georgia's got elite Georgia personnel, it's a problem for anyone. If they don't, then all of a sudden, when you've got the firepower Ole Miss does, that's when you can make some stuff happen. Not to mention that's a Super Bowl type mentality. And so anything and everything they can bottle up and unload on you that one given Saturday in Oxford, that is hard in college football for the best team in the country to overcome.
No, I agree. All right, so before I completely throw it to you for one of your Big Ten takeaways, are there other guys like this that we're missing right now? Are there other players, transfers that we kind of know in the back of our mind they're really good players, but we've either forgotten about them because they got somebody else or they had a year off or they were injured or didn't play up to their potential last year? Like I think like Dumas Johnson, linebacker from Georgia going to Kentucky, like he's All-American 2 years ago. Like if he is that guy, that significantly changes that Kentucky defense. But I feel like at media days, everybody's talking about Deion Walker, and there wasn't a lot of Dumas Johnson talking. I know health is obviously a little bit of that, but are there many guys that you think we're forgetting about like this?
Yeah, probably, especially the ones that transferred before spring, ironically, even though they're in a better position. Mine's a little more high profile, I guess, although I doubt most of the country that is more casually minded remembers that Brock Vandagriff transferred to Kentucky. That one's, like I said, a little bit more high profile because it's a quarterback. But I'm thinking about any quarterback that transfers that is a multi-year guy that hasn't started.
Right.
That guy was 5 stars at one point out of high school. Low caliber high school ball, but he was 5 stars once upon a time out of high school. And for all the talk this time last year about them getting O'Leary, I believe it was, from NC State, and that just kind of never really went anywhere. Well, then that puts your guard up, and you don't ever want to buy into a transfer quarterback again. But the folks around Kentucky are saying, hey, man, like this one actually probably fits what we want to do better than he did. Of course, they didn't tell me that this time last year. No one said Devin O'Leary is a bad fit this time last year. So that's one I'm watching. I just kind of out of it.
Too, because Bush is going to run that offense a little bit faster. I think make the processing a little bit easier. Interesting that you went casuals there, because I did have a couple on-set debates about best rivalries in the SEC. And I had one Oklahoma fan respond to me, and it was a couple paragraphs of a response. I only caught the end of it and said, as a matter of fact, and because they really got mad when I said, actually, I might put the Egg Bowl too when I'm ranking SEC rivalries, and he said, I don't even know if I've ever watched the Egg Bowl. At Cole Cubelic, you're a casual.
And look,
has not turned on, however you want to rank it, 2, 5, 8, 12. Never turned that game. By the way, a standalone college football game.
Yeah, it was like the night of Thanksgiving.
There ain't anything else on.
Yeah, what are you talking about? You watching early Christmas specials? Do they start Frosty that night? What else could you? I know you're not. That kind of person has a miserable family, so there's no way he's spending time with family. It's like, I don't even watch the Egg Bowl, bro. Okay.
Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving special. Yeah, good for that one. All right, so we're going takeaways, things that maybe after we removed ourselves from media days felt like they're a little more important than when we got them at media days. So from the Big Ten perspective, give me one that hits you.
Lincoln Riley said the thing out loud that a lot of people have been saying behind the scenes about USC, and that is, we're playing catch up. He said, we're playing catch up. Now, if you saw that quote absent context, you may have thought he means, defensively, we're behind and we got to be better. We got to catch up, which wouldn't be wrong. They do have to do that. He's talking about his situation out there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't what he led with, by the way. He didn't say that on like the main podium, to my knowledge. I think it was gathered throughout the day. But he's right. So you could look at it as excuse making, but he's right. They don't have their act together. And I think he has been pretty stunned by how much that is the case. Because when you go from Oklahoma, which is one of the steadiest as you go programs in America, to USC, what you think is, I'm going to USC in the era of NIL. USC, NIL, it just sounds like a perfect match made in coaching heaven. It has not been that.
Hollywood.
It has not been that. And I think that surprised him. I think he took the wrong guy out there as his DC, and he said, I can't scrap him. He came with me. I can't scrap him immediately. We gave him 2 years. It stuck. He fired him. And now they brought the guy across town in Deanton Lynn. Even if there is a massive upswing in production, they're middle of the pack at best. And that's it. That's big if. So the vibe around Lincoln Riley, I don't know how to describe it other than if you were kind of fed up with something, but you were also really competitive, and it was the beginning of a season, so you had your best face on. If you blended all that together, that's how he felt. That he felt in a way that wouldn't surprise me if this time next year they were a contender, or this time next year he was in the NFL somewhere. Neither of those things would surprise me.
All right, so it's like a couple counters here. And you might know a little bit more about this than I do, but what happened on the NIL front? Because they were almost one of the, I'm not going to say they were Texas A&M ahead of the curve, but when he first gets out there, it felt like they did have their act together and they were way ahead of the curve. And like, here comes Romello Height, and here comes Bear Alexander, and here comes all these guys. And all of a sudden, here comes Marshawn Lloyd. And even though they weren't super 5-star mega elite players, they were good football players that were going to help them. How did all of a sudden it go to hell in a handbasket from that? And then all of a sudden, like now today, the facilities are a problem. The facilities don't become a problem in one off season.
Yeah.
But that was a part of what he said also. So there was a couple of things. I agree with most of what you're saying, but then there was also a couple of things that I was like, wait a minute. How did we get to there so fast?
Forget about the facilities. I mean, you're right. Like the facilities are what they've been since he's been there. USC's never led the way in facilities. That's not why they're not winning.
Right.
When he first got out there, so I know this is only 3 years ago, but I think that was still at the dawn of the NIL era, where all you had to do is throw money at kids.
Yeah.
And it has evolved rapidly. And I don't necessarily know that everyone is picking up what's being put down in the NIL world right now. Yeah, there's big money moving, and it's largely legal to be done this way. It's not the highest bidder that's winning this stuff. There's the top layer of just dollar amount. How much am I going to make? But like places like Texas, places like Oregon, they have this down to a multi-layered science. And to the credit of recruits and a lot of these recruits' families, they've gotten really smart really quick about this thing. I'm not saying you don't have your occasional outright bidding war. Of course you do. You're going to have them every cycle. Those usually aren't the kids you're going to build your program with and win with either, though. So I think Lincoln Riley and USC realized this is not as simple as having some dude run our collective. Let's have a bunch of money in our collective because we're USC, and we'll just go pick. We'll go cherry pick across the nation, because they found out they were offering a lot of money to kids and still weren't landing them. And they're like, wait, it's supposed to be that easy. It's not that easy.
So what you're saying is a lot of people have caught up financially, and now you still have to recruit.
Yeah. Oh. The byproduct and the beauty in it, if you want to call it that way, is now that everyone's largely figured out the dollars and cents portion, it's the ones who are good at recruiting who still win. Crazy how that works. And so here's the added problem they have. If you are Georgia or Auburn or Florida or LSU, you don't have to go far to get elite linemen. They do. They're not in California. They're just whatever theory you want to throw at me about that. Quarterbacks are out there. Receiver talent, DB talent's out there. O-line, D-line is not out there. They had just had two of them committed from the state of Georgia. They've both decommitted in recent weeks. And it's just, they've got to come recruit the South. They got to come recruit the Midwest to get those kinds of kids. And you're going to have to take them out of someone else's backyard who is already really good at this stuff.
Last one on USC quickly. Do you think he says he's playing catch up. He knows what a lot of that is. He's aware of it. Another big issue that I've had is we get to spring practice and a couple of guys get nicked up on offense, and we push spring practice back a couple of weeks, like literally shut it down. I had never heard of that in my life. You get this 4-game redshirt ruse that a lot of kids are playing now. This game where they play 4 and say, hey, I'll practice, but I ain't going back in the game, coach. And he admits that he lets them stay on the team and practice against his kids and try to make them better. And most coaches that I have talked to, they're not playing that game either. So that all to me goes back into, I guess, just no other way to say it, but the softness of the program, so to speak. Is that something that you think he's aware of and that can actually change?
I think he's aware of it. I don't know if it can change. I will say some of the feedback I got from folks around the program was Caleb Williams is out. That's universally perceived as a big blow to the program. And man, they'll tell you he was sort of a headache to deal with behind the scenes, to the point where it's not that you breathe a sigh of relief the talent walk out the door, but what comes with the talent walking out the door when they have Miller Moss still there. They're not staying up at night worried about the quarterback position, is what I'm trying to say. But as sure as they said that, the next sentence was, yeah, the defensive line problems, they're every bit as real as they seem.
Yeah.
These are USC folks now. So they're
sure.
If anything, they're looking to mask it a little bit. And it's just, I don't, if I got a receiver that's a little bit unsure of himself in fall camp, he could find himself in week 4, week 5. I don't know how defensive line play finds itself. If you don't have it, you just don't have it. And what he was doing was he was talking about their cumulative weight gain. They've put on 300 pounds combined. And so you divide that by however many guys. I don't think they have the play. I don't think they have the guys there. They brought that stat across town from UCLA. That UCLA team did not have terrible defensive talent.
No.
USC's got pretty subpar defensive talent.
All right, so you brought up that runway that Ole Miss has a little bit earlier. Could probably put Missouri in the same category there of teams that just have a really smooth runway to be able to figure things out this year. They're going to have some time to be able to get their act together. And if there are other question marks, figure them out. I had a chance to visit with Sark at SEC Media Days, and a couple of things stuck out. First, I was specifically talking to him about his offensive line and a benefit that I believe that he has that I can't find too many other teams in college football that have, and that is your second string guys having played significant snaps. Cole Hudson basically being a starter, but we'll see how that plays out. You got another tackle that played a little bit last year, ready to go, that could plug in and play either guard or tackle right now. So probably 7, almost 8 guys that can legitimately play. Not a lot of guys have that. And we're talking about offensive line play, and he's like, well, yeah, we last year wanted to get those guys going early. He said, listen, because we're going into this playoff year, we're planning on rotating everybody early. We're planning on playing all of our guys a little bit more early in the season. Like, we want to get more guys reps early on, get them ready, and try to get them going for the end of the season. Now, this is a team that has the defending national champions in the first third of their season. Are we going to see a massive rise in rotational play, quality reps for guys that normally would? I'm not talking about up 24 with 7-11 left in the fourth quarter. I'm talking like second quarter, maybe 7-3, and all of a sudden here come the 2 backup corners. Or we're putting the second offensive line in, or at least a couple guys up there. Is this going to be a normal thing now with this 12-team playoff, and guys are going to have to be ready for however many weeks of a college football season?
Yeah. Talked to Ryan Day about it last week. He said the same thing. Talked to Lanning about it. He said the same thing. And the reason I mentioned them is because, number one, I got him to talk about it. Number two, those are the kinds of teams that have the kind of depth you're talking about. Texas has got it. Georgia's got it. I mean, the kind of teams you would expect to be there at the end. I think they're going to do it. And the other thing is, I'm looking at Texas' schedule here. Okay, so they go to Michigan week 2. That's a big marquee game.
Yeah.
Outside of that, they are going to play Colorado State, UTSA, UL Monroe, and Mississippi State in the first 5 weeks of the season. So those are games, unless they go drastically sideways, that you should be able to do what you're talking about. And look, even if they lose like a game to Georgia, okay, what does it mean? We're putting 12 teams in this thing. What does it really mean? So if the biggest risk is we get a lot of guys experience, we recruited them here to do that anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe we lose a game because of it. We're not planning on losing 2 or 3 because of it. We think we'll be better on the back end due to this. I think a lot of them are thinking that way.
Okay. All right. So two-parter here. McElroy does not come up with great points very often. He had an absolutely brilliant thought while we were at Media Days, because we were talking the same thing we just said about the Ole Miss and Missouri schedules. And he goes, listen, here's a part of this that we need to be talking about that we're not. We keep saying 10-2 is in, 10-2 is in, 10-2 is in, no matter who it is.
Yeah.
He goes, go look at Ole Miss and Missouri, man. 10-2 might not deserve to be in.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wondered, have you thought about that way? Because it opened my eyes when I took a look at it. I was like, all of a sudden, you're going to need like an A&M or an Auburn to be a really good football team. You're going to need Kentucky to be a really good football team to be able to find your way in, because we think we probably know who 2 of those likely losses are. It doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of other great teams on the schedule if that's the case.
Yeah. It's hard to say that now. I agree with him, though. Missouri and Ole Miss are the 2 where you kind of, if they go 10-2, you bank on people saying SEC schedule.
Yeah.
And just assuming it means a certain thing instead of doing what you should do. And that's everyone knows the conference they play in, but you need to have a sort of a blind schedule measuring mechanism. And if they play a whole lot of really good teams like Florida does, and it's in the SEC, so be it. If you play a fraction of Florida's schedule difficulty wise, okay, cool, you're in the SEC. You lost your 2 biggest games in the conference, and elsewhere it's just a bunch of middle of the road, tomato can in any given year. You still could make the playoff, but you don't deserve like blind consideration over 11-1 Big 12 team or something like that at that point.
All right, guys, I want to tell you about the Better Business Bureau of Alabama. If you're a small business owner in Alabama, you need to be accredited with the BBB. They're going to be able to help you in a lot of different ways. Just get organized, find ways to get people to find your business. Incorporated locally in 1954, the Better Business Bureau has been serving Central and South Alabama. Over 4,100 accredited businesses in 50 counties with offices in Birmingham and Mobile. listen, if you live in their Google footprint, just search Better Business Bureau of Alabama. You're going to be able to find everything you need right there. Website, easy to navigate, and go there, see all the different tools that they're going to be able to offer you. If you're a business owner, once you're accredited, they can add a ton of value to your business and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Facebook ads, they're going to give you expert guidance, customized solutions, and they're going to drive traffic and conversations to your business. Also, website design, something that the Better Business Bureau of Alabama wants to help you out with. Make that thing look a little more professional, get some people going to see what you're going to be able to offer, and then elevate your brand with digital billboards. We've seen these all over the place, right? Well, why not go to the Better Business Bureau of Alabama to be able to have your business there? A lot of ways that they can help you. Go to bbb.org, put your location in there in Alabama, and you're going to see everything that they can do for you and your business. Hey, the other thing, I just want your thoughts on this too, that I thought was really cool. I was doing SiriusXM and Sark sat down with us for a little while and asked him about the helmet communication. And he goes into his first year as an offensive coordinator in the NFL. And he's like, I'm calling and plays into a guy who's 12 years older than me. And he comes to the sideline and he's like, hey man, I got it. But basically shut the fuck up. And he's like, I don't need all this extra stuff. He's like, give me the play and get out. Leave me alone. I've been doing this for 10 years. And I started thinking about, because I've had a chance to do XFL and UFL the last 2 years. I have heard some nightmare situations. OCs talking about how terrible their players are. Quarterbacks literally saying they want to fight their offensive coordinators. Like, we've heard these things not really go very well. And this is with, keep in mind, running backs and receivers also having the ability to listen in. That's not going to happen with this. I kind of think that some of these coordinators, Josh, think this is just going to be really easy. And they're like, man, I'm going to load my guy up. I'm just going to tell him everything. This is like playing PlayStation. And it's not going to be that way, because the kid's not going to see it the way that they're telling him to see it, because you can't tell someone to see it. You have to teach them how to see it that way. Are the guys like Sark and Lane and maybe Petrino and some of these guys with NFL play calling experience who know, don't overdo it, don't give them everything, try to just feed these little, I mean, Sark was really cool. He goes, Cole, it might be like outside zone and a certain back's in the game. And we're like, hey, remind him, stay off that tackle's outside hip. Like, that's where his track is. Or if that safety goes 2 feet left, well, then watch your corner crash. Or tell your back to stay in and chip that D end. Like, just little things like that, which I was like, I mean, that's somebody to me that felt like they know how this is going to go. And I'm just not sure a lot of guys have a good idea exactly how this thing's going to work. And it could become something that causes a lot of commotion, a lot of confusion. I can see some quarterbacks melting if this gets to where I have the feeling that it potentially could get to.
If you think about driving a car, I mean, if the thing's aligned properly and it's built the right way, if you're driving down 65, you don't look like this right here. You're just kind of shift it to the left a little bit, shift it to the right. You can drive it with your knees for an extended period of time if you want to. That's if everything's the way it should be. Now, if you got a blown out tire, if you've got bad misalignment, I mean, you're constantly fighting that thing. I think about players the same way. If you've developed them properly, if you've immersed them in your system, and if you've ingrained it in their head properly, you don't need to play PlayStation with them. You shouldn't need to. It's what you just talked about. It's just a little nudge here, a little reminder there, a little heads up over there. And elsewhere, they should be developed and trusted to be able to run your system, or else what in the world are you even doing?
Problem with that is we've been making it easier and easier and easier and easier all these years. Like, I can remember talking to Lane when he was at Alabama, and he had a younger quarter. I think this was Jalen's freshman year maybe. And he had a couple young guys playing. He goes, guys, listen, I got a lot of resources here. So it's pretty easy. He said, I got a play caller who signals in the offensive line. I got another guy that signals it in for the receivers. We got another guy that signals it in for the backs. I got a guy that signals it into my quarterback. So I got a lot of help here because we have and there's a couple true freshmen that play. And if they're in, they have their own signaler. And we just tell them what route to run. And we were like, good Lord. That's ridiculous. But yeah, I just like use your driving analogy. If all somebody has to do is tell you what exit to take, but instead, they start to verbalize the rest of the trip and where you're going to go and this, and you got to turn right now, signal here, we're going to go there, 3.2. I mean, all of a sudden you're like, well, can you just give me the exit? I don't need all that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Yeah. I kind of wanted to run that one by you and see what you thought about it, because I think a lot of people just think, oh, it's just going to make it all better. It's going to be so much better. And
hey, here's the other thing now. I don't know how much of this I can say. Let me just broad strokes say I've watched teams work on this, and it's a very controlled environment when they're working on it. Okay. It is not controlled on Saturdays. And so, as much as you may think you have it figured out as a coach, we are going to watch college football players go through this for the first time. So there are a million things going through your head. There are a million things going on when it's 3rd and 3 and 18 seconds left on the play clock and 93,000 people are full throat. That stuff right there has not been simulated, and no one's been put through that yet. So just a little thought for everyone who thinks they're upgrading their operation here. Just a little thought.
When you can't hear yourself thinking kneeling, and that guy, just because he can give it to you in your ears, you still have to give it to everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's the part that won't happen and won't take place. And go watch a couple spring games. I don't know if you picked up on this, but you'll see these coaches, they got the little walkie-talkie and they're like, like what they're you start yelling into it and you're just like, okay.
Yeah, here's the other thing too. The other thing is if I got a hurt leg, but I know I have no crutches, okay, I have planned on having to figure out a way to walk. Just like if you have no comms and it's really loud, you've assumed it's going to be tough, but I got to make sure I get this play in and get it disseminated. However, if you think you have a crutch, you haven't planned on needing to walk. Just like if you think you've got comms and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, something doesn't get delivered the way it's supposed to, and all of a sudden it's on you, and you only got one timeout left, there's still 10 minutes to go in the game, and you don't want to burn it. Where's my crutch? It's not here. Total panic.
So, yeah, good stuff. All right. So, something else from Big Ten, maybe that you picked up on that you like thinking a little bit more about.
Let's see. Let's go with Jonathan Smith at Michigan State.
I heard your segment on this the other day, and I'm on board with you because I love the guy.
He goes there from Oregon State. I would say identity-wise, what you kind of have to do in a previous life at Oregon State is kind of the same way you have to live at Michigan State. I think when he and his staff first went to Michigan State, the whole understanding of how to recruit the area, the whole understanding of what NIL even is was like a fire hose to the face. And I didn't talk to him about it publicly, but like behind the scenes, they'll level with you on that sort of thing. But the thing about it is that eventually will die down. They'll eventually get their hands around that. When they do, I'm not calling him like Kalen DeBoer of the Big Ten or anything, but I think in terms of just raw football ability, a guy who's a stud at developing, evaling, coaching on Saturdays. They got one of the best in the conference up there. In East Lansing, I don't know if it's year 2 or 3 or 4 when it finally clicks. I don't know. I think they'll be bad this year, although he did bring his quarterback with him in Childs. I don't think they'll be a great team this year. But in coming years, I think they will go a long way along with Wisconsin, who's got a stud head coach in their own right, and Nebraska with Rule. That right there is a very important thing because it could serve to make up what we have not had in the Big Ten, and that is a tier 2. There has been no tier 2. It's been tier 1, a couple of teams every year, and maybe Penn State's tier 2, and that's it. And then it's just a bunch of average to below average. That's what's hurt the Big Ten. That's why the TV schedule has looked like garbage outside of one marquee game maybe per week. And so now, like, you get 3 or 4 teams to matter that frankly should always matter, and they haven't for a while. That's the key to making the Big Ten more watchable.
I kind of love that because you and I have also had the conversation about how we're trying to make ourselves not use fit anymore just because we've seen so many guys that look like there is not a better fit and then it doesn't work.
Yep.
When I think Michigan State, I think Cedric Irvin, I think TJ Duckett, I think Le'Veon Bell. Even the quarterbacks have not been like super dynamic. Like that is a blue collar. We are going to be ready to fight you anytime, anywhere. Like you will not out physical us. And that's kind of going to be our personality. And you get the epitome of that in Jonathan Smith. So I think it's a good point. And like, yeah, they had, Kenneth Walker and Peyton Thorne could push it down the field a little bit to Coleman and whatnot. But like still at their core, they've always been just rugged, I feel like. And that's obviously what he is.
What they were doing to Michigan in those years where they beat Michigan, the exact same stuff Michigan's been doing to Ohio State recently. Exact same vibe.
Which is cool because one of my other takeaways from SEC Media Day is talking to some different people. And I asked a couple coaches about this too, and they didn't really want to say it on the air or talk about it, outright, is I feel like that we are coming. Now, listen, I'm not saying all of it, not 100% of it, but we're coming a little bit full circle here. And it goes back to what Sark said about, extra offensive linemen. I think they're going to play an extra offensive lineman at times a little bit more to try to be a little bit bigger and badder. You heard Sam Pittman say, embrace the hog. He told us on our show, we're going I formation. Like they have a real fullback on their team now. I talked to Hugh Freeze and he's like, listen, we can talk about all these freshmen, all these receiver transfers. He's like, we are Jarquez Hunter first. Like we want to be a downhill rush the football team initially, and we'll build around that. By the way, you and I talked about this, like Jarquez Hunter, the most untalked about potential star in the league through all of SEC Media Days. It feels like the O-lines in the league are ahead of the D-lines collectively for the first time since I can ever remember. Because we're used to Bama having 6 or 7, Georgia having 8 or 9, Mississippi State's got 2, Auburn's got 3, Kentucky's got 1 badass, Ole Miss has got a dude that you don't want to mess with, Tennessee's got 2 interior guys, Florida's got guys that can rip off the edge. There's not a ton of scary dudes over there this year, Josh. Like there's just not. Maybe they all pop up, guys that haven't been playing a ton. Are we sort of coming a little bit full circle here? And are we going to see more smash mouth, grinding out games in the SEC, which also benefits that schedule talk that we had a little bit earlier?
Yep. Been trending this way. Actually, it started to trend this way last year. Look at the offensive numbers. Across the country, they were down points per game. The SEC, I believe, was down points per game. But I'll tell you something else to monitor. Everyone's looking for ways to shorten games right now because they know they have to play more of them. Yeah. So everyone's got in their head workload. Everyone's got in their mind, man, how do we make sure we have guys fresh? Well, everyone magically arrived at the same answer. If we run the ball more and we're effective at it, that's less plays per game. Voila. It's like 1955 logic, but apply it to 2024. So I don't think that's foreign. I don't think that's 1 or 2 outfits that are feeling that way. I think if Texas or Alabama or Georgia, any of these teams that fancy themselves title contenders are fancying themselves as that because they are going to have at least plus to very, very good line of scrimmage play. If that's the edge you have, it's a no-brainer what you're about to try and do with it. And then you look across the league this particular year, and you're right, you don't have those stalwart defensive fronts that you said, man, how are we going to get past this one? Even Georgia, you don't talk about like that. Like LSU's Achilles heel in the preseason is that. Bama's got, I think, good-looking depth, but no standout guys, at least that are established right now.
There's Texas, no super scary guy there like there has been.
Yeah. It's a nice, solid bunch, and maybe they evolve into a couple that are standouts. Texas just lost 2 studs to the draft that were responsible for a top 5 run-stopping unit last year. So no one looks as formidable maybe at the top end as they normally do. So I don't know if that just means bet unders across the board or what, but I do think stylistically that's what gameplay will look like down here this year.
That's why I had, going over to the D-line part, I had Tennessee as my number 1 group. And I know as soon as you say that, everybody would be like, oh, yeah, look at the guy coming off the edge. But honestly, the reason they were 1 is they have 4 legitimate proven defensive tackles.
Yep.
And I don't know who in the league can really say that. And the other team that I would have at the bottom of my top 5 would be South Carolina, because they have maybe 3.5 proven D tackles. Like TJ Sanders playing really good late last year. Tonka Hemingway's been playing for about 9 years. Bookie Huntley's been playing for about 8 years, it feels like. They have guys that have been in the wars. They've played. They've been productive. Again, not Quinnen Williams, not Jonathan Allen type players, but just solid, above average, good SEC D tackles. Like I talked to Shane about it, and he's like, listen, our D line is going to be way ahead of where people think. So are you with me on South Carolina's D-line, Tennessee's D-line being a little bit ahead, even though we say most of them probably a little bit behind where they have been?
Tennessee, yeah. I mean, Tennessee was like that in the spring when I went up there. That's all they wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, they thought their defensive staff was underrated. They certainly thought their defensive unit was underrated. And that's with Nico Iamaleava walking around. That's like, that took a backseat to them saying, hey, kind of nudge you in the ribs. Watch out for this guy. Remember him. Remember him. South Carolina, you got reason to feel that way. South Carolina, I don't know why. I'm kind of a little bit more, let me make sure, let me see it. That's those more, let me just make sure my eyes validate what, the gut's kind of feeling on that. I do think there's really good reason to think they're probably overlooked. But I also, if this makes sense, I also think there's reason they're overlooked. And it's because there hadn't been a whole lot special about that program.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So who do they open with?
South Carolina.
I should have all that memorized. I don't. And you should too. Don't you work for this league or something like that? Don't you cover games down here? They open against Old Dominion.
Mm.
And then at Kentucky week 2. And let me tell you something.
That's a big game.
One of my favorite games. Those games right there, the ones where both fan bases are thoroughly convinced they should win. I mean, like they're disgusted at the idea of losing that, and both of them feel that way. That's such a beautiful thing that early in the season.
God, Akron, and then a week off, and then Ole Miss, and then at Bama, and then at Oklahoma.
So
come on, Norris.
Yeah, get it figured out.
Before I go back to your Big Ten takeaway, the last one, I didn't have Bama's D-line in my top 5 in the league. Offensive line in my top 5 in the league. Would you be as mad at me about that as Alabama fans are? LSU, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Mizzou. And listen, I'll say this. I said it on set with Dusty when we did the segment. He wanted Bama at 5. I said, I have no problem with it because I love the guards. But it comes down simply to this. Your center was half absent in spring ball, and one of your tackles that you're banking on being great hasn't put pads on since January 1st.
Yeah.
And had some technical fundamental flaws last year. So
you're talking about Proctor, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they can't be good because Brailsford's a good player. Tyler Booker's one of my favorite players in college football. The middle 3 could be really good, but I can't act like there's not real questions.
You could factor in depth there. I don't think they're nearly as quality on their second line as they would be. I do wonder when you say that about Proctor, I do wonder that. I think people kind of forgot that. They remember he transferred out, came back in. They forget that also includes really no work in the spring. No. I do think this, though. You look at some of his numbers, you look at his game tape late in the year last year. He did play his best ball late before he had that injury before the playoff game. So that's promising. Who they got? Pritchard, I think Pritchard, the right tackle.
Yeah, and Pritchard apparently had a good spring. I think they feel good with him. So, and Jaden Roberts is going to be fantastic. So the middle could be great, but also, and Brailsford knows the offense. So him not being there, it might be a non-issue. But I still want my guys to have work together if I'm going to be talking about you as one of the best groups in America.
Yeah, 5 or 6. I think that's fair.
All right. One more from the Big Ten from you.
Talked to Lanning a good bit. Jed Fish, I walked in behind him.
He's awesome.
And they didn't even recognize him, man. Like security had him open his suitcase. They went through his underwear and his
He got the Saban treatment?
Yeah, and he didn't even say anything. It's like, okay, yeah, I'll open my suitcase for you, sir. Why wouldn't I? I'm just the head coach at Washington. He was really honest, by the way. Jed Fish has been really honest. Kind of folks are trying to build him up, and he's saying, no, man. Someone asked him, what's the biggest challenge this year? He said, building a roster. He gave like really, really fundamental, we're starting over from scratch sort of responses. I don't want to go.
All right, so let's just go here because you said talk to Lanning a lot. Josh, there's a lot to like about them, man. Like they feel like they feel very much going into the year like the Lamborghini and you're getting ready to make a cross country trip with 4 kids And it's like, if you're going to win a national title and you're going to take your entire family, to Disney, like, I don't know if the Lambeau is exactly what's going to get us there. It looks great. It sounds fun. And I bet it's going to go really fast. And it's super aerodynamic and all the cool stuff. But what about when it starts to snow? Or what about when we got to take a detour through gravel road and hit some mud and some ice, whatever it is? I watched the D-line the other day against Cal. This is one example. It's not a lot. And I'm watching this game and like these guys are getting displaced. Like they're getting pushed off the ball. And I'm thinking, this is Cal. Now, when they move and when there's pressures, they're very precise and they're quick and agile and athletic. So they're disruptive and they cause a lot of problems that way. They can win their one-on-one pass rushes up front. So there is a little give and take, but I think no one talks about them the way that they still even talk about Texas and Oklahoma coming into the SEC. And it is going to be a different style of football. It's going to be a different brand of football. And it's going to be week after week after week. And the advantage they have, I feel like, is they've had multiple coaches in a row that are trying to build it that way. I'm wondering if people are going a little overboard. I think Lanning is the next rock star head coach in college football. No doubt about it. Have a ton of talent. But I just think there are some concerns that people are completely bypassing. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, so let me comment back to front. First off, good metaphor with the Lambeau on the gravel road. I think it ate them alive that Washington ran the ball on them. Specifically in the Pac-12 championship game, they were very confident. They matched up well there in the rematch, thought they should have won the first one. We'll get them the second time around. And the fact that Washington outrushed them in the Pac-12 championship game, that ate them alive. And it's because they won the line of scrimmage, which ate them alive. Because they were convinced, that staff was convinced that's a matchup advantage for us. And it wasn't. How much better did you get over the span of one spring and summer? We'll see. I do think that from a depth and versatility standpoint, their defensive front is unique in that conference outside of Ohio State. Ohio State's and maybe Michigan. Those are the only ones that have the depth, but guys that can do different things against different opponents. And that's the hallmark of some of these deeper teams in the past that have gone on runs. You know what? One of the things that's not a weakness is, but could be a little bit more of a red flag than some realize is Dylan Gabriel. People have watched Bo Nix go to the draft, and they said, "Oh man, they're losing a good quarterback, but they got Oklahoma starter, so we're good." That's not the way this works. And I talked to a couple of coaches that will end up facing them, maybe in the playoff, maybe in the regular season, and they said, "Hey, that guy's not as good as Bo Nix. You guys know that, right?" And I said, "Well, okay, tell me what you mean by that." And they said, he is a volume guy, great kid, really talented kid, but he's the kind that is not going to necessarily transcend the system he's in, if that makes any sense. He's not the guy that's going to be making wow plays. Will Stein's thought of as one of the best coordinators, up-and-comers in the country.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to have to earn his money this year because that's the kind of guy that you better be scheming folks open. Ball's got to be pinpoint. It's not an overly dynamic, surefire first-round talent at quarterback. It's a guy that's played a lot. He's seen a lot. I don't think the whole transfer thing is going to bother him because I talked to him the other day. He said, "I've already done the transfer thing. This has been kind of easy for me second time around." But I don't think about him in those games against inferior opponents. I think about him against Ohio State secondary. I think about guys like him with Caleb Downs on the other side of the ball and all those returning guys up front. And I wonder, is that a situation where you're still finding your 27 points? Or do you go full crowbar in the bicycle spokes and just go over the handlebars, grind to a halt?
Just jam it in there.
Yeah.
Because also, too, think about what Nix was. Productive, yes. Yards, yes. But even at Auburn, when he had his struggles turning the ball over at times, the dude was still a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's still tough as nails, the ultimate competitor, back down from nothing. So essentially a contrast in what you described with Gabriel in a lot of ways that could be the difference in a game or two. We'll see. All right. So post-media days, tier 1, Ohio State, Georgia, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia. Like who Who is tier 1 exiting media days for Josh Pate?
Keep talking. Give me yours because I'm actually pulling up my numbers. As you and I are talking right now, I'm getting ready to debut this on the next night's show. So I'll go ahead and give you a little sneak preview of what my numbers have.
Well, it'll be later tonight. Folks will be able to get that. We'll get out early to get out of your way. We don't want to cause any confusion there. My tier 1 in college football right now is Ohio State and Georgia, and that's it. I think there are a lot of ways that Bama could be close. I think there are a ton of ways Texas could be close. I think there are a ton of ways Oregon could be close. But those two, to me, just are separated a little bit more. You mentioned all that depth that Ohio State back has in the front seven, talent at tailback. And here's where people need to sort of think about that in a little bit of a different way. Like your NFL thing with Quinshawn, that's fine. Travion Henderson, if healthy, is as dynamic as any other back in college football. But it's not just about having a hammer or talent at running back. Chip Kelly creates space better than anybody else in college football. And if he can figure out a way to get everybody on the same page pretty early and get that thing going pretty quickly, creating space for those backs is going to be very different. And then obviously Will Howard's got a lot to do with that and receivers, but that's why I think they're a little bit different. I would still put Georgia ahead of them, though, because continuity at coordinator and known commodity at quarterback. That puts you a little bit ahead of the Buckeyes for me if you're Georgia.
So, by the way, not that this necessarily means a whole lot, but just think about what we're talking about in the Big Ten. Ohio State and Oregon are the consensus 1-2 right now to start the season in that conference. And they're also right there in the top 4 of any playoff projection that I've seen so far. Do you realize both of them not only took transfer quarterbacks, but both of those transfer quarterbacks were thought of by the fan bases they left to be the next best option. Like Kansas State's kid, they wanted Avery over Will Howard. And there are a lot of folks in Oklahoma that said, love Dylan Gabriel. We actually want Jackson Arnold, which is kind of interesting.
It's crazy.
But it's just kind of, it's a thing. So I'm looking at my numbers right now. Georgia, Ohio State are 1-2 for me. This is before I've touched it. This is just model output. But I don't have separation. I got a little separation, but not enough to say it's a tier 1, tier 2. Because Oregon, Texas, Bama's up there for me as well. You know, one team that I'm just going to have to manually override because there's no way I'm putting them number 6 to start the year.
I thought you were going to go the other way. I thought a team, and I knew who the team was going to be, by the way, if you were going to say, I'm going to have to manually override them up my rankings. But I want to see who this is first.
Who did you think I was going to manually override up?
Miami.
I'm probably going to have to bump Miami up a little bit.
I told you.
But look, my numbers have Penn State number 6 in the country. And I'm not quite sure I'm ready to do that with a brand new coordinator. And they're at West Virginia week 1, by the way. That number's about 10. Yeah, they're favored by about 10. And they sucked at explosivity last year. And they brought in Kansas's OC, so we'll see about that. But I think
the OC hire was good. You have somewhat proven quarterback. I mean, he's played. If you're just looking at there, I don't think the O-line will be as good as last year. Tight end, super solid. Mm-hmm. Running back, great. Both the front will be okay. This comes down to schedule, and it's lightened up a little bit, unless we're just talking about actual team. But if you're talking about what they're going to be capable of, I think they're more capable of than what they've been the last few years. James has had them finish in the top 12, 6 of his 8 years there. So they should be in. Now 6, yeah, it's a bit of a stretch because your quarterback, I don't think is dynamic. I just think he's a good college quarterback. Or he's got
ahead of Ole Miss, ahead of Notre Dame.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. The other thing, so this is the big story of this year. Okay, so if there are aspects of Georgia like that defensive line that end up being A- or better, then it's probably ball game for a lot of these other teams. If Texas's defensive line is B+ or better, what I'm saying is there are still teams that could beat them, but it's a very small handful. If Texas is vulnerable on the D-line, if Georgia's just B- on the defensive line by their standards, all of a sudden the circle of teams that could be in this thing vastly expands because all of a sudden you don't have these vintage elite across the board units at the end of the year like Bama's been in some years. And so that's the thing to watch early in the year. And it's not going to tell the whole story because those teams will evolve as the year goes on. But I mean, what if, think about this. I know everyone thinks Georgia's just going to mop Clemson in week 1. What if it's 20 all midway through the fourth quarter? What if you just got a dogfight there? What if Clemson hasn't gotten the memo they're just supposed to play dead? All of a sudden they're an inferior program because Vegas says so.
Well, no, but that's where some of the stuff really interesting early in the year and you kind of brought it up, which by the way, I think what you're saying is for Georgia or Ohio State to get got maybe at any point, the little question marks we have for them are going to have to be way below where we think they are, and the other people's question marks are going to have to way exceed what that all has to happen for that to happen.
If the question marks for those handful of teams aren't really questions, whatever the rest of the country does is irrelevant. I don't care if you get in the playoff. If Georgia's in it with a plus defensive line, elsewhere I don't question them. So elsewhere they're going to be plenty good enough. They're going to skull drag you. You don't have a shot. You have a shot to get in the playoff, and that's as far as you can hope to dream.
That's where some of these early, not just week 1, but like the first 3 weeks, like you bring up that Clemson Georgia game, that Clemson front is going to give them everything they want. Like you're going to find out if you're ready for that right now. All right. So Texas, Michigan. Is the Michigan offensive line ready to be what they've been the last 3 years? We're about to find out. Is the Texas O-line ready to win the Joe Moore Award? Because that's probably the best group you're going to play all year right there. I mean, that's good. That's going to be really interesting to see. Miami and Florida. Is Cam Ward going to fit, going to work? Florida might not have the dudes they normally have on defense, but I promise you this, Austin's going to give him every damn look you could ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we're thinking about just mentally processing, working, fitting, like that will be tested, especially on the road there. Like that's going to be tested there. So even though, like you're saying, there's some of these games early in the year that people are just checking off, but there are going to be matchups inside those games that are going to decide things way down the road. They're going to be really cool to watch. Yep. So I'm excited. How was, I didn't see the Twister 2 take. How was it?
Well, it's not Twister 2. It's called Twisters. I gave it 4 Chalai out of 5.
Which actually doesn't work because in the first one, I believe there were multiple, I think there were Twist Eye in the first one as well. So how does that work?
Great question. First off, just hats off for the great question. It doesn't work is the answer. And secondly, here was what was disappointing. On a movie that I rated 4 out of 5, there's no overlap. You could go watch this new one and there was an original Twister, like if you weren't already aware of it. Also,
let's be real. What was the floor here? Like out of 5 Chalai, what was the floor?
Oh no,
3.5. 3.5.
I graded it extremely harsh. You don't understand how worried I was about this. I was petrified that they were going to hijack this thing, and they didn't. Hollywood did not hijack it, and they didn't try and stuff it like a Thanksgiving turkey full of all kind of political stuff and all kind of agendas. They just let it be a movie about storm chasing. It was great. You could take the little ones to it. I mean, the language is mild. The action sequences can be a little rough. I don't think anyone even so much as kissed. I don't. It was just straight up storm chasing. It was
sounds like not a movie for me, by the way.
Not a documentary, although it does sound like it.
Speaking of Georgia's schedule that you just mentioned, will you next time go to Athens? It could be the Auburn game. It could be Tennessee later in the year. Maybe Georgia Tech. That could be an interesting one. So I think Tech's going to have a little more juice than people think. Will you go via train track next time you visit Athens? Because if that's the only way you're allowed in, technically. So
I just want to know once and for all: am I a Georgia homer or am I not? Because I get accused from the outside world of being that, and then their fans come after me. And you're referencing a DM that I just happened to make public earlier today. Hey, bro, you ain't even allowed in Athens anymore. Sit with McAfee up on the train tracks. Can you imagine, by the way, walking down those train tracks? What are you doing here?
Don't they sing a song about that, by the way?
Yeah. What's that coming down the tracks? Everyone who's been kicked out of this place.
It's Pat, just like Saturday Night Live back in the day. That's what it would be. All right. Hopefully you'll be able to make that happen. But I did think about you. I saw the movie poster. We did the daughter's birthday party last Friday night and saw Inside Out 2. And I was like, there's the old Twisters right over there. I could just sneak in there and check it out, but didn't do it. So
we'll do it.
Maybe. And your Kevin Costner sequel got canceled. So
I saw that. I went and saw the first one, and then all of a sudden, we're just not getting the rest of what was billed as a saga.
They just said it's not gonna
Sagon. I don't even know what happened.
No, it's kind of like the Pac-12 during COVID. They just said it's not.
Even if Kevin Costner's not immune, none of us are immune.
Thanks for hopping on. It's good catching up. I'm looking forward to joining you in 2025. So,
see you next year. See you next trip.
All right. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Great stuff there with Josh. Appreciate him taking some time to join us. Always have fun. And don't know when I'm going to be on his show again, but I guess that doesn't matter. Blue Delta jeans, they do matter. The most comfortable denim you're ever going to have. Go to bluedeltajeans.com. Custom fit, stretchy, flexible, breathable. They can look good enough to put a coat and tie on and wear to dinner. You saw most of us had them on. We were at SEC Media Days, Peter Burns and all the other guys, Greg Sankey. But you can also dress them down and go casual. Great for back to school gifts. Am I going off to college? Get a gift card. BlueDeltaJeans.com. Tell them you heard about it right here on Cube Show. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Please like, subscribe. Go check out Josh's show later tonight. If this is Sunday and you're watching, subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcasts if you need to. Also, Spotify, and we'll be back next week.